It's continuing to show we're in a practice session on my
I'm about
screen.
to hit start webinar at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
I'm going to wait a few minutes for our attendees to be entered into the webinar, and then we'll get started. Hello and welcome to the Myositis Association's Empowerment Clinic on Nutrition and Meal Planning. I will be your host. My name is Rachel Bromley, and I am TMA's Senior Manager of Education, Support, and Advocacy. Unfortunately, our scheduled panelist that was due to be here today, Livlin Gill, could not make it due to an emergency, but serving in her stead is Heather Engelman. Heather is a registered dietitian with more than 16 years of work in the dietetics career field. Currently, she is the manager of nutrition services at Bethesda Nutrition and Wellness Solutions, where she provides nutrition consultation, diabetes prevention classes, intensive behavioral therapy, and chronic care management. Heather previously worked as the executive director of the Oklahoma Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and as a clinical dietitian for a rural hospital in central Oklahoma. In 2015, she was awarded the Oklahoma Outstanding Dietitian of the Year for her commitment to the field. Congratulations on that. Heather is a graduate of Oklahoma State University and earned her graduate degree from Iowa State University. Heather, thank you for being here. Also joining us today is Mary Lewis. Mary is a retired registered nurse and a patient with dermatomyositis. She hosts a weekly support group on nutrition and movement. Pre-COVID, she taught low-impact aerobic dance and yoga for women with health issues. Mary is a member of TMA and currently resides in Georgia. Mary, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Heather, let's start with your presentation.
Right. So, okay. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. A little bit of a last minute change, but I am more than happy to provide this information for you. Again, my name is Heather Engelman, and there's a little bit about me, but I think Rachel did a great job of introducing me, so I'm not going to bore you with all this information. But I did want to let you know that everything that I provide in this this presentation, make sure that you do seek out your healthcare provider to identify any interventions or supplements, anything that you might need to address your condition, just because that way you have a little bit more of an individual protocol for your health. So when it comes to meal planning, the first thing we look at is your nutritional status. And the reason we do that is because we have to know what is lacking or what is being affected by your condition before we can figure out what kind of foods or what kind of nutrients you might need to address the situation. So we might look at things like your current weight versus your weight history, if you've gained weight or if you're losing weight. And we might also look at muscle wasting and if there's any energy deficits that we need to discuss, because what we're really trying to do with meal planning and addressing any inadequacies are to improve the quality of life. Quality of life is so important, especially with myositis, because symptoms and side effects can be crippling, as you know, and management is key. So we have to try to address the things that are causing the inadequacies so that we can make life better and to make overall just every day your quality of life a little bit improved. So when we look at the components of a balanced diet, we want to look at the diet as a whole. And we try not to look at just one food group, because whenever there is an inadequacy, or whether caused by something that you're doing to try to compensate for something, or something the body is doing to cause that inadequacy, we have to look at every food group, because nutrients come from a variety of foods. So, we want to look at carbohydrates that you'd find in grains and fruits and vegetables and even dairy products. We want to look at calcium, because, with some of medicines that you can have some bone loss. And so we need to look at dairy products and try to make sure that we're consuming enough of those. The meat, fish, and poultry is where you're going to get your protein to help with muscle building. And with beans and nuts and seeds, those have an exuberant amount of good fatty acids that we need, and some good fiber for your digestive tract that may also be affected by the condition. And so we have to have this whole foods type of look at your diet to make sure that we're getting a good balance of everything, because they can overall improve the quality of life and help avoid any nutritional deficiencies that might occur. So when you look at the different aspects of the diet, these are all macronutrients. So they're the main things that you hear about within a diet. So they would be the carbs, the proteins, and the fats. So carbohydrates are going to include anything like sugars, starches, fibers. They're all carbs. And what's the most important type of carbohydrate? Well, there isn't one that's most important. They're all important, because we have to focus on the amount of total carbohydrate in the diet, not just whether it's, say good or bad, or healthy or unhealthy. For example, healthy whole grains like whole wheat bread, rye, barley, and quinoa are better choices, but we have to have sort of a good realm of carbohydrates that we're consuming. And a lot of people are confused about carbohydrates just because all of the low carb diets that are out there. But, we have to try to have, again, that whole foods effect, because carbohydrates have a lot of nutrients in them, and they give you more than anything the energy that you need. Because with myositis, you can have moments and days where you just don't have the energy that you need, and carbohydrates are going to help provide that. They're the best source of the energy that you can get from food, from all three food groups. With protein, that's going to be more for your muscle mass and function, like it says there. Protein helps build muscle, and with myositis, we know that there is issues with muscle function, and so that protein helps build anything that could be lost. So we want to make sure that you have enough protein within your diet to support that. And then fats are important, and we'll talk about that in the next slide a little bit, but fats are very important because we need fat. Fat helps cushion all of our organs in our body. It also helps us absorb some of the vitamins that we're eating, because there are fat soluble vitamins that if we don't have the fat, then we can't absorb them. So fat is important in some aspects of the diet. The type of fat that you eat is also important. So I have here a list of the different fats in the diet, and we have healthy fats and not so healthy fats. So the unhealthy fats are going to be your trans fats and your saturated fats, and that you have some examples here of where those fats come from with different foods. And those are the ones you want to limit, because those foods can actually cause some inflammation. And inflammation, as you know, is a problem. And so you don't want to try to consume things that are going to cause more inflammation if you're already dealing with it. So we want to try to limit those with this diet. But the unsaturated fats are actually very healthy, in that some of them will actually make less inflammation. And so we want to make those a part of our diet, things like avocados and nuts and oils and fish. They're very good. And some of these also have the omega-3 fatty acids in them, which you may have heard of before. And omega-3 is a polyunsaturated fat, and it does have the anti-inflammatory properties that I just mentioned. And those are very important. So also in our diet, not just the macronutrients, but we have to try to get enough of the micronutrients. And those are all of those good little vitamins and minerals that we see in different multivitamins or that you can find on the shelf at the store. And a lot of these do help with anti-inflammatory. And what you can do is, like, for example, you can look at little ones like folic acid. If you're on something like methotrexate, you want to make sure you're supplementing with folic acid. And with one thing that I don't see it on here, B12, that's one I would like to mention. Actually, it's not on there, but as we get older, our body does not absorb it well from food. So it's best to try to have that in your food. And I have a few others here on this next slide. Calcium, that is one I mentioned before. If you are on a glucocorticoid, sometimes that can cause some bone loss. And so calcium is important to try to supplement in your diet for that. And, you can get that from dairy products, and some dark green leafy vegetables also have that as well. And vitamin C is also a really, really good vitamin that helps with antioxidant properties and helps with some anti-inflammatory. And another one that's on here is vitamin D. And I know that sometimes that can get low with this condition. And we don't want low vitamin D because it can have an effect on osteoporosis and fractures. And some medicines, though, they do make you a little bit sensitive to the sun. So we have to be aware of how much vitamin D we're taking in with our diet. Some other things that we might have in our diet, maybe some salt or maybe some alcohol. But we have to be aware that salt can cause some edema and swelling. And so if you do have any sort of swelling or you have fluid accumulation anywhere, you do want to try to consume a little bit less salt. The recommended intake is about 1,200 to 1,500 milligrams. But 1 teaspoon of salt has over 2,000 milligrams. So that's something you really kind of have to watch and just be aware of what you're eating. In alcohol, the general recommendation is 1 drink per day for women and 2 drinks per day for men. But that's also very individualized, meaning that if you don't find that there's any problems with that, then it's not something that you need to worry about. But if you find that you do have some issues when you drink alcohol, then it may be something you want to be aware of, and that it may be causing may exacerbate the problems. So there are some supplements that we do recommend. Coenzyme Q10. So some studies have suggested that if you supplement with this, it may help reduce some of the symptoms from polymyositis. But again, like with these supplements that I mentioned before, that you do want to talk to your doctor about some of these, but there is some data to support that maybe they may be helpful. Also glucosamine, it's very good with joint pain and arthritis. There is a little bit of lack of research with myositis, but there is a lot of research with its role in cartilage and tendons and muscle repair. And so it may help with maybe some of the side effects of myositis. Creatinine supplements, that's another thing. I think that has been researched quite often actually with myositis, because it's been studied in muscle diseases and it's thought to build muscle. And that's why maybe you might see it with muscle builders. And you see that sometimes with them. And so that's because it does help build muscle. So it may be helpful in trying to build muscle with conditions like this. So whenever we are talking about a balanced diet, we do have to talk about portion sizes. So whenever you look at a portion size, it's sort of a standard amount of food. And what we usually use for this is whenever you look at a nutrition label, if you have one, it will say what a portion size is for that specific food. And whatever portion size it lists, then it will also list all of the nutrients that are in that one portion size. So you have to kind of pay attention to what the portion size is and what a serving size is. But for example, the nutrition facts label may indicate a half a cup of cereal for 1 serving, but if you eat 3/4 cup, that's your portion size. So you have to increase the amount of carbohydrates, fat, vitamin A, all the things that are listed on there by that much, knowing that you are taking in more than what is recommended there. So if you want to know, what is a portion size? How much should I be eating? So this is a little bit of a good infographic, but they have these all over the internet. You can Google these. But a deck of cards is usually a serving of meat. It doesn't seem like that would be very much, but that is a serving of meat. It's about 3 ounces. Like a fist would be 1 cup. So like 1 fist would be a measurement of 1 cup. Even like a computer mouse, like as there is a small baked potato, those type of things. This kind of lists what a portion size is. Now, in the American diet, portion sizes seem to be about 2 or 3 times this size. So you have to, like I said, with the nutrition facts label, you have to take into account how much you're eating and how much is the actual portion size for that. So if you tried to find out how much was in a green bell pepper, how many vitamins and minerals, well, that might be in a small green bell pepper, where at the grocery store you see huge ones. So you do have to just take into account how big your food is and how large your portions are, so that you can take all of your vitamins and minerals and macronutrients into account. So to incorporate all of the food groups, an easy way to do this is to use something like MyPlate. Now they do have, there is a website called myplate.gov where they do list a plate like this. And it lists having 1/4 of your plate for protein sources like our fish, and a half of it for non-starchy vegetables. There we have asparagus there, and our starchy vegetables and our breads, like our whole grain bread that we like. And then you can also have about a 1/2 cup to a cup of dairy a day, like milk or yogurt. I think it's got a good little nice looking parfait right there. And also some fruit. A fruit is a good snack as well, but it's not part of the plate. It is on the side of the plate in a small portion. So this is a good way to kind of portion size your meals, so that you know that you're getting a balance of everything and not just one food item, because that balance is key to making sure that you get all of the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that you need to be able to manage your condition. So when it comes to meal planning, we have to talk about how to plan those meals, right? So whenever we're planning these meals, it's hard whenever, maybe you don't have enough energy to try to plan that meal or to try to put it together. And so there's tips and tricks that we use for a lot of different situations, actually. And I recommend these tips a lot to a lot of my patients. To use a slow cooker, because, you just throw it all in the pot, and then it just cooks it all for you. And then a lot of times you can cook your chicken at the beginning of the week or on a day that you actually do feel good or that you do have some energy. You can utilize that energy to be able to support yourself when maybe you don't have a lot of energy, or you're having some muscle aches and pains, or maybe cannot do as much that day. You can also, with vegetables and even fruits, you can, cut them up and bag them or put them into containers for later on in the week. As long as they're kept cold, then they should be in good condition. They keep for a few days that way. But that's a really good way to do that. And then if you do like salad, you can actually pre-portion that as well, so that when you're hungry and you've already got it pre-portioned, you just take it out of the bag and put it into the bowl, and then you add your dressing that you like to have on top of that. Nut butters are really good because they do have the omega-3s in them, and they do have a little bit more nutritional value than just regular butter, so they're really good to keep. And then also to help with meals or foods that maybe your taste is off a little bit because of medicines or different things, you can add some different seasonings to food. Some popular ones are like cumin or chili powder. Those type of seasonings, they give a lot to the food, or even like ones that are already mixed together, like Italian seasonings. The only thing you have to be real aware of is if those seasonings have any additional salt in them. And you can look at the nutrition label. On the bottom, it should have some ingredients in it. It'll just let you know there if there's some salt in there. So this is an example of what a balanced meal might look like for just one particular meal. So whenever we're putting together this breakfast, where we have some scrambled eggs here, and that would serve as our protein. Eggs also have healthy fats in them. In addition, it does have a little bit of saturated fat, but it actually has some good healthy fats in it. Eggs also have some vitamin A, vitamin D, B vitamins, and that selenium down there, that's a real good antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. So we've got our protein here that's going to help provide some of that. But we're not just having eggs in this instance, we're also having a smoothie. And this smoothie is going to have fruits, and it's going to have our nut butter in it, maybe some yogurt. So that in itself is going to also provide some protein, but it's also going to provide our calcium that we need and some carbohydrate to give us that energy. So the eggs are giving us the protein that we need for our muscles, and the smoothie has the fruit in it and the yogurt in it that's going to give us the carbohydrate for energy. It also gives us some vitamin C, like I mentioned before, that's a good antioxidant, and some fiber for our digestive tract. And it has that omega-3s in it. And then you also have the coffee up here, because we all enjoy a little bit of coffee. That does have some micronutrients in it. They are not as much as we'd want them to be because of how good coffee might be, but it does have some nutritional value in it. And then lastly, this would be, here is a sample balanced menu for a whole day. So what you would do with this is, depending on what your individual circumstances were, you can eat 3 large meals a day, or you can eat 5 to 6 small meals. And here it shows how you can break it down. So as you can see, I divided that breakfast that we saw on the previous slide into 2 different times to eat, because maybe you're not as hungry. Maybe you want a smaller meal, because if you don't have much energy to cook your food, maybe you cook a smaller amount of food and then just eat a small amount, and then have another small amount a little bit later. However works for you to fit it in is the best for you. So you need to decide what's best for you to be able to incorporate everything, and try to think to yourself, have I had a good amount of carbohydrate today? Have I had a good amount of protein today? Have I had some fat today, some healthy fats? You know, have I had some nutritional fruits and vegetables? And if you start out by trying to just consume at least 1 or 2 of those a day, you'll get to the point where you do have a balanced meal. And a balanced meal is what's going to improve that overall quality of life.
All right, thank you so much, Heather. That was very helpful. We're going to hold our questions until the end, when we have a Q&A session. So please put your questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will get to that. I wanted to speak with Mary. Mary, how are you? Yeah, gotta unmute.
Gotta unmute. I'm good. Great.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. We'll have time for you to ask her some questions in a minute. But Mary, let's talk a little bit about your myositis journey. When did you first start having symptoms, and what were they?
I have dermatomyositis, and my journey is a good example of how sneaky and strange these illnesses are. I actually started out with waxing and waning, primarily thigh and hip pain in 14, had no idea of what this was. And I also had episodes of getting up. I would practice for aerobic dance, practice yoga, get up, and for, I don't know, 15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, I would feel like my thighs were going to collapse. They didn't. It felt like my legs had been asleep, except they hadn't. And this went off and on through 14. The pain lasted through about 16. Again, back and forth. It would, okay, now it's gone. And then it was back. In 16, I began having a rash on my left arm. No itching, but a very distinctive chain looking like rash, and a rash here. I've had rosacea, skin issues in the past. I didn't think, a whole lot about it. Suddenly, when I was back up in the high Arctic in the summer, high noon sunlight, I began having biting sensations all over my legs, like pins were poking me or bugs were biting me, that kind of stuff. This progressed into the more typical heliotrope rash on my face, which also would get better and worse. And then in 19, my hands were uncharacteristically dry. The cuticles were all funky, very red, that stuff. Finally, again, this would go back and forth. But in looking back, I realized I became more and more sun intolerant. I just wasn't understanding any of it. Finally, in April of 2021, I got super red knees, legs, ankles, and just itch. The scalp itch, as I told the derm I went to in May of 2021, I now understand why Vincent van Gogh cut off his ear. If it's half as itchy as my scalp and my face, I get it. So yeah, but it's again, a strange combination, you know, these diseases can be so odd in their presentation.
Well, let's talk about your passion for nutrition. How did that come about?
I think I've kind of always been interested in nutrition, but I got more interested in it in the late 90s. My other history is that I have 3 other autoimmune diseases, one that I've had for years, one also an extremely rare one that was repeatedly misdiagnosed. The long and the short of it is that in the late 90s, I was put on 2 medications, which that wasn't known then either, were very obesogenic. Over 3 years, I gained about 60 pounds and I didn't get any better. And the symptoms didn't get any better. So I eventually got to the place of, you know, talking with the doctor, stopping the meds. And I completely changed my diet to a much lower form and different form of diet, different form of carbohydrate primarily, and batting sugar out of it. And what Heather was talking about, portion control, and lost all of that weight. And that has continued. I eat a moderate to low carbohydrate diet, lots and lots of vegetables. I eat berries, you know, and of course protein, but I've continued it. And ulcerative colitis was my first autoimmune disease. And shockingly to me, it completely put the ulcerative colitis in remission. And as time has gone by, I had no clue then. I didn't know why that was happening. I just felt a lot better. And over time, the specific carbohydrate diet came into being, and there's now some pretty good science, especially with UC and people getting to a much better place and even to remission as I did. So
that's wonderful.
That was the beginning.
Well, you sound like you're very disciplined. Do you ever catch yourself eating poorly?
You know, I don't, because this is 22 years of this. And I am very fortunate. The payoff for me has been huge. What I want to be very clear about saying is that my first 3 autoimmune diseases, I came to find out over a long period of time, are all genetically linked. So I'm not trying to tell people with myositis, eat this way and you're going to be cured. No. It is, you know, a good form of a diet, but there are specific reasons why it was so helpful to me. And the biggest thing for me is that I get feedback pretty fast if I really stray from, you know, the eating pattern that I need. So, and my health is really good. Aside from developing myositis, my health is quite good. So
good. What would you say your nutritional priorities are?
Well, as I told you when we first talked, our MSU Clubhouse group came to being because of TMA's presentation with Dr. Chris Weil. I was knocked out by that presentation. It was excellent. And, you know, he is certainly a national leader, if not a worldwide leader in myositis, specifically IBM. And the two things that he stressed were you gotta have the protein, not just IBM. All types of myositis are muscle wasting diseases. And so I've gone afield a little bit, but anyhow, the two things he stressed were protein and movement. The movement I had down, and I thought that my protein was pretty optimum too. And I think that for a person with myositis, but without myositis probably was. I was at about a 60 gram a day protein level. I have now knocked it up to 75. And in our group, I weigh about 125 pounds. In our group, our recommendation based on scientific recommendations is between 25 grams per meal on a 3-day a meal plan and 30. So a total a day between 75 and 90, specifically to prevent, you know, loss of muscle in people my age. I'm 68. Even without myositis, at my age, you lose muscle at 3++++%, you know, a year without adequate protein and movement. The two go hand in hand. So in a sense, for my disease, that was a life-changing presentation. And we have really, you know, been drumming it up with folks, because the byline for his presentation was that there are many things with this disease, and we all know that are completely beyond our control, but preventing unnecessary frailty through muscle loss is not completely beyond our control at all. So that for me is a big deal. I think beyond that, I pretty much had it down, but that has impacted me. And I do my yoga movement every day, but has it strongly reinforced it and caused me to do more resistance exercise? You betcha. So yeah, hitting the protein has been really important.
And I know that when we talked, you mentioned a protein calculator. Did you want to?
Yes. And I wanted to bring up, I forget what the next questions were, but I wanted to bring up what some of our members have shared, you know, that's working for them. People who have symptoms that I don't have, like marked dysphagia. The protein calculator is www.calculator.net. And there's a search box. You can enter protein in it, and then it will ask you specific information, your weight, your age, your activity level, and then give out some protein recommendations that are within a range. Our recommendation is to follow those of the American Dietetic Association or the Centers for Disease Control. There's a World Health recommendation, but it's a single number that is just more like, if you go below this, you're gonna be protein deficient. And we're trying to, you know, get more optimum than that. But also the science recommendations that I've read for sarcopenia, which is basically what we're talking about, recommend between 25 grams and 30 grams of protein per meal on a 3-meal a day plan.
What is your approach to meal planning?
It has gotten much simpler. And part of that's because of my age, and I'm retired, and my husband and I are kind of simple people. But I used to be, oh my gosh, I grew up, all recipes and chopping and everything from scratch and complex. Nope. I do lots of, for instance, pressure cooking, slow cooking, a meat that we will eat on, 3, maybe more days than that. Then adding vegetables. I'm a big salad freak, but adding flash frozen vegetables on the side, or making a little vegetable casserole, something like that, is basically how we eat. But how we eat focuses a lot on, we cook something today and it's going to last for 2 more days, so that it's minimized. And I think for a lot of our members, it's a big deal. Cooking can be a very big deal.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about mobility issues and members of your group, and what do they do to overcome those obstacles?
I would say, and I think I'm lowballing here, but better not to exaggerate, I would say that a good 60% in the overall MSU group, and I think more even in our clubhouse support group, have significant weakness/mobility issues. Also included, which impacts this, is respiratory issues like interstitial lung disease. It's obviously harder if you have mobility issues, weakness with your legs, and you're having to expend extra energy to stay up, etc., do what you're doing, cooking, and you have lung issues. So the other thing is, sometimes we don't think about hands, and hands are a big deal for many of our members, finger hand strength. So doing things like, one member of my group, I think I shared with you previously, had the great idea of, she takes all of what she calls dry salad ingredients, arugula, all kinds of lettuce, spinach, all the dry leafy stuff. She prepares it, carefully dries it, puts it in a big bowl, and that will last her maybe 4 days. Then when it's time to eat, she has the simplicity of, say, cutting up 1 tomato and part of a cucumber, and then she adds often tuna, some kind of protein to it. But the point is that the prep is very minimized by the pre-prep. Another member was talking about, which I thought was fabulous, she has dysphagia, and she's very focused in on, so how can I get enough protein when I have this swallowing stuff? And she has a gizmo that I was not familiar with. It's called Nutri-Bullet. So she has learned to cook meats, then she uses her Nutri-Bullet and grinds the meat up, and either she has broth in a can or broth from something that she's cooked, possibly the meat, and she puts some of that broth in there, and it works great. She is able to swallow and get much more protein in that way. That totally impressed me.
Oh, that's good. Finally, what other advice do you have for patients and caregivers?
Well, one of them is like with the meal planning, keep it simple, sweetie. And for everyone to realize what these patients can be up against. Going to the store can be a major deal. So for these patients, COVID time has sometimes been a very positive thing in that many more meal grocery store delivery services have come out of this, which cuts out, for instance, having to get a wheelchair out or your rollator out. How do you, deal with all these bags if you're alone? Not everybody has help. And so just realizing the effort and energy that goes into something that, for instance, for me, I have no movement impairment. Going to the store is no big deal, other than for all of these patients, immune suppression is a big deal, being around people. And if they have a lack of movement ability, unlike me, if someone isn't social distancing in these times, it's much more difficult for them to, for instance, move away. So there are many things. I think to understand that for people who have been independent, hardworking people, etc., I have good friends now whose stories I know, and it was like, boom, it hit. They ended up in ICU or the hospital. They were immobile for a lengthy period of time and had to fight their way back to any walking with a rollator or anything. To understand how difficult it is for folks to ask for help when they often really need it and would absolutely welcome an offer, The other thing I forgot that I did want to share, I'm sorry, I'm jumping a bit around.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead, please.
But we also have patients, these medications affect people in many different ways. Nausea. For some people, they really depress their appetite or stimulate them for sweets. Many of our patients have gotten, they develop type 2 diabetes second to all the corticosteroids. So it becomes ever more challenging. One product that one of our members introduced us to in our group was Premier Protein Shakes, which for our members, especially with diabetes, has a wonderful profile. Only 1 gram of sugar, 5 carbohydrates, and 30 grams of protein. They're quite delicious. If people want a more slurpy kind of effect, they can put the individual bottle in the freezer for a short period of time, and you get that kind of smoothie, thicker effect. But it's really helpful for people who just, for a variety of reasons, it's very difficult for them to eat enough food. So it's a great supplement.
Thank you for
Protein.
that, because I know that picking the wrong smoothie can be detrimental because so many of them are just laden with sugar. So
yes.
So.
And I'm happy to say, being an old retired nurse, that many of these products for nutritional supplementation have so improved. Their profiles are much different than what they used to be. So.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. We appreciate you. Stay on for Q&A in a little bit. Before we go to the Q&A, I want to share some nutritional resources real quick.
Oh, can I add one more thing, Rachel?
Sure. Yeah.
This is, it's on the expensive side, but there's a way in which it's worth it. Many people like ice cream. Rebel, REBEL, Creamery ice cream has no added sugar. The sugar comes from erythritol, a plant derivative. They put enzymes in it. So if people, and some are lactose intolerant, I'm just adding that, it will work for them too. It is expensive, but if you pay attention, as Heather spoke about, to portions, the portion is 2/3 of a cup. Probably most people eat like 3 times that much for a portion, but it's absolutely delicious. And it is something that people who are diabetic, for instance, or are fighting high sugars because of the medications that we take. It's something that you can have a delicious tasting treat that's going to work for you. And thank you. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, some nutritional resources. Wholesome Village is a meal service that delivers meal packages designed by registered dietitians containing 6 days worth of non-perishable food, including 3 meals and a snack per day. Heather, this is your service from your organization. Did you want to say a few things about it?
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Yes, Wholesome Village meals are medically tailored meals. So we currently have meals for diabetes, heart health, and high protein. The original goal of this was to provide meals for those who had either been recently hospitalized or those who did not have any assistance at home for meal preparation, where meal preparation would be very difficult. So the most innovative aspect of our meals is that they are all mix and eat. So you have it, you mix it in hot water, warm it up if you like, and you eat it. And our dietitians have worked very hard to make the meals both nutritional and enjoyable. So it's a great resource to have.
Thank you so much. And they can access it at that link.
Yeah.
Meals on Wheels America is a leadership organization supporting the more than 5,000 community-based programs across the country that are dedicated to addressing senior isolation and hunger. This network serves virtually every community in America, and along with more than 2 million staff and volunteers, delivers the nutritious meals, friendly visits, and safety checks that enable America's seniors to live nourished lives with independence and dignity. This link will help you find a meal provider near you. Imperfect Foods is a company that sells groceries that have cosmetic quirks, irregular sizes, or are just surplus, which meant they used to go to waste or get undervalued. While they may look different than what you find in a store, they're delicious and high quality. They also source a wide range of sustainable, affordable groceries with no imperfections to satisfy all your shopping needs. Everything is delivered to your door each week. Farmers markets provide opportunities for small farmers and businesses to sell their products directly to consumers, and they help meet the growing demand for locally produced food. This link will help you find a market near you. A food co-op is essentially a grocery store that's owned by the people who shop there. Members get to decide what foods and products are stocked on the shelves, where those items are purchased, and what quality standards both products and vendors have to meet. Co-ops also tend to carry foods and products for people following special diets or managing food sensitivities. If eating local and/or organic produce is important to you, a co-op is a great place to shop. You'll also probably have several brands to choose from if animal welfare standards like cage-free eggs, grass-fed beef, and free-range chickens affect your purchasing decisions. And you'll find products from vendors who champion sustainable farming and fishing practices. To find a co-op near you, check out the Co-op Directory service. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks and food programs that helps millions of people find food and grocery help in their communities every year. Connect with your local food bank to learn about upcoming free food distributions and to apply for national food programs. And now we have time for the Q&A. Let's see what questions we've got. We have a comment. For those of us who are lactose intolerant, we need to receive our calcium from other sources. What other sources would you suggest, Heather?
So there are several ripened aged cheeses like Swiss and Parmesan. Those like cheddar cheese, they're lower in lactose, and they may actually contain almost 95% less lactose than whole milk. So yogurt also that has active cultures in it can also decrease some digestive stress from lactose intolerance. And there's also available on the market now, there's a lot of dairy products that say reduced lactose in them. Those are a good option. And then there's also lactose replacement pills that can help with aiding the digestion of the dairy products.
Okay, and our next one is, you mentioned B12. Can you recommend some foods that are good to eat as a good source of B12?
Sure. So B12 is found in fish, poultry, eggs, and some dairy products. Usually it's foods with an animal origin, but if you do have a vegetarian type lifestyle, it's also found in some fortified breakfast cereals.
Okay. Should we not have more than half or 6 ounces of dairy a day?
So a serving size of dairy is 1 cup. The reason I mentioned half a cup earlier when we were looking at the plate is because we want to try to spread out that dairy consumption throughout the day for optimal absorption, because the body can only absorb so much calcium at a time, and we want to make sure and absorb as much as we can, especially if we have some bone loss from medications. So if you have smaller portions, more frequent times in the day, then you're more apt to absorb more of that. Usually, I guess I should add also that usually the recommendation is 2 to 3 servings of dairy a day. So if you're looking at milk, it would be 2 to 3 cups of milk a day. But like I said, we want to spread that out throughout the day.
Okay. Curcumin was listed as a helpful supplement. What are its benefits? I've heard about it before, but never in the context of myositis.
Okay, so curcumin is the main active ingredient in turmeric. And it has very powerful anti-inflammatory effects, and it's also an antioxidant. So we talked about anti-inflammatories and antioxidants being part of in nutrients, and so that is its main benefit.
Okay. Our next comment was, could you address the idea that those of us with myositis diseases should eat 60 plus milligrams of protein a day?
Okay, so protein dietary recommendations for that are based on weight. And for a healthy individual, the recommendation is 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. So you'd have to there are different places on the internet. I'm sure you can figure out how to calculate that. But what you do is you have to convert your weight from pounds to kilograms, and then you need 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of your weight per day. And for higher protein intakes, which would be adjusting it up to 1.1 to 1.5 grams of kilogram per day, those are associated with increased muscle protein synthesis. So that's correlated with muscle mass and function, and increased muscle mass and function. It's essential that with myositis, that you have adequate protein, like Mary mentioned, that you need adequate protein, but you also need it from high quality protein sources. So the amount and quality of protein you eat matters. Animal foods will supply more of the essential amino acids that we need. Nearly all plant foods, with the exception of soy, quinoa, and I think buckwheat, lack essential amino acids. So if you're vegetarian, then you'll need to pay special attention to how you're getting that protein. But with regard to the amount of protein, it is based on your weight and not just one single number. So you do need to have that calculation done to figure out what is best for you. But again, the normal healthy individual would be 0.8, but for myositis, I'd probably range it between 1.1 to 1.5.
Okay. Melissa says, I would love to meal prep, but my family won't eat meals like that. What is your advice to change their perspective? That's a less clinical question for you to answer. Do you have any insights on that?
I know Mary might have some more insights on this one, but my biggest advice on this is that with any condition, whether it's diabetes and having to follow a diet for that, or with myositis, you do have to get your family, and not just them, but your colleagues and people you work with, people you're around. You have to get everybody on board and just let them know what you're going through. And you have to sort of get their support, because you don't just need that with food, you need that probably emotionally and just, within your life. That's just how it is. And that's true with any condition, to be honest, and not just this. And you have to sort of have that conversation with them and let them know this is what you need to be healthy and to feel good. And if they want you to feel good, then they'll get on board. But yeah, I get what you're saying. It's hard to, especially if you're a people pleaser like myself. You want to do what they want to do, and try not to think about yourself. But you do have to put yourself first sometimes, because if you don't feel good, sometimes the rest of them don't feel good because they feel your pain. So you do have to have that conversation with them.
That's true. James wants to know, what is your opinion of a plant-based diet?
My opinion of a plant-based diet is I think it's a good thing. There's a lot of like the Mediterranean diet is as a plant-based diet. It is very, it's been promoted and actually researched with myositis, and it has a lot more fish in it than it does of like the red meats and things like that. It is more plant-based, and it does have some good healthy effects. I think it's definitely worth trying. But again, you do have to watch the protein that you are getting from it, because you don't want to just take that out completely. If you're going purely plant-based, you do need to do some research ahead of time to see what sort of protein sources there are in a plant-based diet. So that would be the first thing I would look at, but it's definitely worth looking at because it does promote a lot of fruits and vegetables that do have a lot of the anti-inflammatory foods that can help with myositis.
Okay. Kathleen asks what thoughts you have on a gluten-free diet.
Gluten-free. So I laugh because it's kind of a fad a little bit, but it does have actually a little bit of, there's a little bit of research with that and myositis. And the reason being that whenever you have myositis, sometimes you also have the digestive side effects from it. And like Mary mentioned with ulcerative colitis, and sometimes you can have those side effects, and sometimes a gluten-free diet can actually help with that, just because your side effects mimic needing that diet, because you can be gluten intolerant with that. Maybe not so much that you need a gluten-free, but maybe you're just gluten intolerant, and so you just want to try to avoid it. There has been some research that it does work, but it's not there's not a lot of research in it. So it's something that you could try, like as long as your doctor's aware of what you're doing, just because there are some nutritional inadequacies with the gluten-free diet. Those who are on it have done a lot of research with trying to make sure that they are consuming a balanced diet with it. But it doesn't affect as many fruits and vegetables as it does your whole breads and whole grains and that kind of thing, your fibrous grains. So that's one thing that we probably need to do some more research on to find out more about, to see if that's truly something that would be more beneficial for myositis.
Do you recommend a resource to find recommendations for which brands of supplements and how much, like what quantities should be taken for each supplement?
I usually recommend a multivitamin to get all of those. I don't usually recommend having just one nutrient, because the way that, all those vitamins and minerals work is that they help each other get absorbed better. So if you just take one nutrient, like if you just take vitamin C, you want to make sure and take it with food, because it will have optimal absorption with that. But they do kind of help each other get absorbed more. So any sort of multivitamin is good. But I do make sure that if it does have the fat soluble vitamins in it, which is the A, D, E, and K, those are fat soluble. So you need to make sure to eat that with food so that you get the maximum absorption of that. I think Mary was going to say something earlier about something.
I had two things, but concerning this, if people are looking for resources, consumerlab.com is a good basic resource that is not biased. They do not accept, they test all kinds of supplements, and they do not accept money from any supplement companies, etc. You do have to pay a relatively small fee to join. They follow the science, update the science that's coming out. And the other thing is, not uncommonly, they find brands that say we have 8 milligrams in each pill. Turns out there's only 3.5. they also find incidences of contamination, et cetera. So if people are truly interested, it's a great resource. It's consumerlab.com. And again, I think it's great because they're not receiving money, you know, from anybody for pushing products, et cetera. So the other thing I wanted to go back to was the person who was asking about motivating, I think, change about the diet in the family and or for that person. And sometimes I think it just helps to be really real. My other rare disease that took very long to get diagnosed was a peripheral form of ankylosing spondylitis, which means that I have 2 autoinflammatory disorders, which means for both of these diseases, my risk of my cardiovascular risk up.
Mhm.
Things like that are important. And sometimes if people really understand that there can be real reasons and outcomes, you know,
Mhm.
for eating, for instance, as Heather was talking about, a more inflammatory diet, it can be helpful. That's all.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Heather. That's all the time we have. Thank you to each of you for joining us today. Our next webinar is going to be Ask the Doc with Dr. Chris Weil, and that'll be Thursday, January 20th from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. EST. We hope to see you there. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.